Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today we do our program on myth busting. The co-host is Chris Rossini, and Chris is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Chris, nice to have you with us today.
Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Good. You sort of look around the media and finding some things out there that are myths more than they are truths. What have you found for today?
Well, let's start with this week we had Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. They were going back and forth about who's qualified to be president and who's not qualified, and just going back and forth on their reasons why they think so. And it was mostly all just hot air. And I say that because when you think about it, Dr. Paul, the presidency has morphed into something so different than what was intended when this country was set up. It's become, sad to say, like a position of emperor of the world. Now, Dr. Paul, is it possible for anybody, any human being, to fill such a role? What do you think about that?
Well, under the conditions, it would be very difficult. But I think we have to distinguish two things, the qualifications, because the founders addressed this subject. They said that there are conditions to allow you to be qualified to run for president and be president. And one, you had to be an elderly person, you had to be 35 or over, and you also had to have been born in the United States, but with exceptions of people who were born, prior to the Constitution. Anyway, it's being born in this country and 35 years of and older. But today, when they talk about qualification, they're saying, do you know how to run things? And of course, that's impossible. How could we ever find a president that knows how to run the economy and tell people how to live and police the world? It's absolutely impossible to be qualified. Matter of fact, from my viewpoint, the most qualified individual would be the one that would accept the principle like the non-aggression principle. The government should never be used to use aggression and force to mold people's lives or who manipulate the economy and tell other countries how to live. That, to me, would be the qualification. It would be a negative qualification. When I was running for the presidency, I used to emphasize that I'm running because of the things I don't want to do. I don't pretend I know what people should do with their lives or how to spend their money, and I don't know how to run the economy, and I have no business telling other countries how to live. But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about experience. Hillary has experience on foreign policy. She knows how to dig up a new war anytime the military-industrial complex wants one. She can go to Ukraine and get one going. She can go to Libya, and she can fuss and fume about the different interventionists. But she's not a bad candidate if you're looking for somebody who wants to manage the economy and qualify to satisfy the neoconservatives. She would qualify. But Bernie, on the other hand, he's qualified, so he believes, because he knows how to transfer wealth with a gun. It used to be thought that if you transferred wealth with a gun, you were a robber. But if you give the gun to the government, they can go and take the money from the successful people and say, well, it's not fair. We want a fair society, and that's why I'm qualified, because I know what is a fair society. So they have no concept of fairness, they have no concept of rights, and they don't realize or want to admit that every time they want to do something for somebody else, they're doing it at the expense of somebody else that produced something, or the government's going to do it. As if the government can, produce wealth and fairly distribute it. It's a preposterous notion that qualifications in the sense of management. First, there's no way they could do it if they were even authorized and able to do it. And even if they could, they have no idea what to do. But it's immoral, it's unconstitutional, it leads to bad policy. And I don't know, it's pretty easy for me to come down on the side that maybe we shouldn't even be looking for the person who brags that I'm qualified because I am a manager and I can manage things better. And that's essentially what's going on now with all the candidates. I can manage things better. I know how to pick can choose which country to get involved in, and I can make them pay for this and that, and I can take care of when we can have a fair society, and it'll be peaceful and prosperous. It is so much baloney that it's amazing to me that people just get bogged down on this qualification. I would hope that someday that we wake up and look for a candidate that's qualified because he knows and understands the Constitution, that he is 35 years old, he was born in this country, and that he's qualified because he knows what not to do and not pretend that he can do the things that he shouldn't be doing or don't know how to do it. So that would be my ideas of a qualified president.
Right. Next, Dr. Paul, unfortunately, the delusional beliefs that people have in the president extends beyond managing just this huge country of ours of over 300 million people. There's a belief that they can run the world. And the United States has been trying to do that for a long time now. And that'll lead to our next topic, which is Donald Trump, who says, I want other nations to pay the U.S. for our defense of them. We are suckers no more. Now, Dr. Paul, where do we get off trying to defend other nations to begin with?
Well, he dreamed it up, and the country's been in that dream for a long time, but he's still acting as if we're a mercenary army and for the military-industrial complex. So Trump offers us nothing new. Yeah, well, as long as the IMF pays the bills and the NATO pays the bills, we'll go ahead and do this. Yeah, we'll build walls as long as we make so-and-so pay for the wall, and on and on. It's always collecting the money, not saying, should we even be doing it? And that's where the where we come up short. So what we do is we're dealing with with providing for security. They claim this is what we do for security, and of course all this intervention is not security. It has to be paid for, of course, and you can't overlook the false policies that we're following by saying, well, just make somebody else pay for it, and then we can continue to operate under these conditions. You know, in many ways, it's a throwback to Roman days, because in the early history of the Roman Empire, they were pretty good. They didn't initially print a lot of money. They just said the military would be rewarded. Go out, conquer this country, and the military people who did it, they get to split it up, and steal their gold, and that's how they paid for their building their empire until they were expanding the empire too fast, and the world was running out of gold. It was all in a hand, so they decided then they would have to debase the currency, and they drifted over to that. But this is in a way what we're hearing said. So when you hear a candidate say, okay, yeah, we need to do it, we need to be in Iraq, but we're going to get paid for it. We're going to steal their oil. We're going to take their oil and pay the bills. Well, that is not good. It's not good economics. It's not good foreign policy. It leads to greater danger. It doesn't provide for our security. And most of all, where in the thunder do they think they have this authority to do this from the Constitution? There's absolutely no authority. There's some authority there to protect this country in a military way if somebody attacks us. But never has there been a clear-cut authorization in the Constitution that says, well, what we need to make sure is that nobody ever attacks us. So therefore, somebody who thinks that we think might attack us someday down the road, we got to go get them. Because that's, we have to prevent war. We have to preempt them. We have to go, and that was Bush's justification for war. Preempted, let's go get them before they even think about attacking us. And yet, how many times have we been invaded? The only time people get really, really annoyed with us is that they get so furious with us invading their country, occupying their country, and stealing their oil and planning to do all those things. So I would say that that whole policy is wrong, but what we need, and wouldn't have to deal with this argument who's going to pay for it, is just accept the notion of a non-interventionist foreign policy. Follow the Constitution, have a national defense, have sound money, have free markets, and if we have some exceptional qualities that we'd like to spread around the world, they would be spread automatically and voluntarily by us setting a good example. But no, we have fallen into the trap that we will have an army and spread our goodness around the world, and now somebody objects to it, so we'll make them pay for all this goodness that we're giving them. So it makes no sense. Can you imagine us being on the receiving end of a foreign country bombing us for 10 years and then being invaded and then saying, well, you have to pay for this. You have to pay for the invasion. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But nevertheless, it's appealing to some because we're broke. Okay, yeah, we can keep doing these things and make those bad guys pay for it. Never suggesting that maybe we shouldn't do it at all. And that's what I'm saying. Non-intervention in foreign affairs would go a long way toward having peace and prosperity in this world, rather than pretending that all we need is a more authoritarian president. That won't solve the problem.
Right. Next, Dr. Paul, not only are there a lot of false beliefs about the president and its capabilities, but also in the president's financiers, which is the central bank. And we know that the financiers are basically one-trick ponies. They print money, and then print money, and then print money. And their main jobs are to, A, backstop the big banks, which we got a taste of that in 2008, and B, to finance all the wars and welfares that presidents and Congresses desire. Now, unfortunately, there are people out there, and they believe that this can carry on ad infinitum. They believe that central banks, because they can print as much money as they want, that actually protects them from insolvency. Please explain why that's totally false, Dr.
Well, the easiest way to explain it, it causes the insolvency. It doesn't protect them against it. But the reason this comes about is not because Bernanke and Yellen all of a sudden say, oh, this sounds like a pretty good idea, I'm going to try this. This has been instilled in the system of central banking, especially in the last 100 years. We've led the way, and every country in the world now has a central bank. And they do believe this. If you create money out of thin air, you can pay all the bills forever. We know that it doesn't work if you're outside of the control of the central bank. If you're a city or state, you go bankrupt. Or if you're Greece, you just can't print any more money, so there's a failure. But even the benefits that seem to come with our ability to issue the world currency of the world, it still builds a system that is insolvent in real terms. Yes, temporarily, as long as people trust the money, they can tide us over and we can keep buying debt and paying a little bit of interest here and there. But ultimately, the creation of money is not the creation of wealth. And for a free market system to work, you have to have an understanding that wealth has to be created, and what you don't consume, you save and you reinvest, whether you do it directly or indirectly, and you have to have that guided by interest rates. And that is real wealth. This notion that they would forever be solvent by printing new money, we've heard it said. The Bernankes of the world just say, well, yes, whatever is necessary. We'll keep printing money. We'll drop it out of helicopters that are necessary, and we don't have to worry about it. But this has been taught to them. It's not just a flare-up of a political idea. It's taught to generation after generation in Keynesian economics and central banking. So we are a reflection of that. But the great thing that's happening now, it's all failing. It's coming apart, and they're panicking by it, and it is going to come apart. So we can expect pretty soon that it will, because the country and the world is insolvent. Our country is insolvent. The United States is insolvent. The dollar is not a sound currency, and there will be a tipping scale one day. It'll come along that even though printing more money on a day-to-day operation and saying that we're going to make it free money for Wall Street, it tends to boost the markets. But eventually we'll come to the day where the promise of new money to prevent insolvency will actually bring the insolvency on. It will work in reverse. So the more the print, the worse it'll be, and this whole thing will come crashing down on us. So we are insolvent. We cannot solve our insolvency by printing more money. It is the printing of money that has brought on this a massive amount of debt that's unpayable. It is the ability to print this money that caused the insolvency in the first place. It cannot be the solution.
Right. Finally, Dr. Paul, let's talk about a solution. And we see it in the markets that gold has been rocketing. Gold is always there for us, just waiting on the Fed. And the usual suspects, now that gold has been rising for a while now, are out. I've read in Market Watch how bad of a value gold is, and today in Business Insider, they're saying that it's poised for a big drop. So let's talk about gold and one of the major myths that people need to understand why it's not true. And we'll talk about this one that we haven't covered before. There's a myth that there's just not enough gold in the world for it to ever be money again. And most people, if they just superficially look at that, they'll be like, that kind of makes sense, and then they just go on with their day. But it's not true, and in order to understand prices and ratios, you can understand why it doesn't matter how much gold is out there, and I'll leave that to you, Dr. Paul.
Well, yes, and there's been much written by Austrian economists to explain that any amount of gold would work. What you have to have is free market pricing, and you have to have adjustments, so you have to have the market operating. But what people don't realize is that prices go down. So in one way, let's say you have to compensate for the increase in population, and you need more gold to spread around. Well, if prices come down, if you have a loaf of bread that costs you $5 on the paper standard, what happens if you're under gold standard and you only have to pay a quarter? All of a sudden there was a massive expansion. So there's always enough to go around. It just has to adjust with the prices. But that doesn't mean that you have to have the exact amount of gold to reimburse anybody and for everything of wealth. What you want is the gold to measure wealth. You want to know what people are thinking of. They're thinking of if you and I make a transaction and I sell you a house for $100,000, we have to know what $100,000 means. You don't come necessarily and walk in with $100,000 worth of gold coins, but you might take a note for this. But we at least know what we're talking about. We need, it's sort of like knowing what a yardstick is all about. But in our world, we have built an economy on the definition of money, and there is no definition. We don't even know what it means. To me, I compare this to building a building where the yardstick is changing the measurement every day, and the building doesn't come out so well. And that's what we've done with our economy. But they keep arguing the case, well, there's just not enough gold. But I think where you need enough gold is if a government or a voluntary private entity decides that they're going to issue certificates or say that this is a gold certificate, that if somebody wants to put the gold certificate down, that central bank or whomever has to be able to produce it. So that's why a gold coin standard is important. But that does not mean that you have to have every single drop of wealth being reimbursable by gold. With the gold standard, in the old days with the gold standard, they didn't just walk around with heavy loads of gold in their pockets. They used certificates, and they trusted the certificates. There's ways to do that, and of course, government has messed it up so much because they never really accepted the notion of 100% gold standard, and so it was never there. It was always fractional, and then it got smaller and smaller until it was totally destroyed. Why they use these arguments is to destroy the notion that gold offers us anything. Gold offers us liberty and freedom and limitation of government, because if you can't run up debt and you can't get the government to monetize debt, that's a limitation. So they want to concoct this story, there's not enough gold, just forget about it, the world is too big. But the truth is there's always enough gold in a free market as long as there's an adjustment. The one major mistake our country made was when we were on a gold-silver standard. Originally it was silver standard, and technically we still are. They fixed the ratio between gold and silver, and the market doesn't like that, because if one is worth more than the other one leaves the marketplace, and they use the cheaper value of the metal. So to be on a standard for gold to really work, you should use only one metal rather than fixing the rate between the two. And you don't want to fix value. You can't say, well, this is it and this is what the purchasing power will be. You have to have the market being very flexible, because if prices didn't change, if prices are going up because there's a shortage of gold, maybe the miners would mine more gold. The gold would have more value. So there would be an adjustment that way. And there's been mining of gold over the many, many centuries. A 3-4% increase in the gold supply happens, and there's an adjustment. But what you need is you need a definition, you need honesty, you have to reject the notion of fiat money and make sure you have a market economy, and then you don't have to worry about the amount of gold and a shortage of gold. The market will take care of that theoretically inaccurate problem that people describe.
Yep. That's it for today, Dr. Paul.
Okay, Chris, and I want to thank you very much, Chris, for your help on this program, and I want to thank the audience for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.